Hi, welcome to the Programmer's Journey. In this video, we have another 5 JavaScript questions for you to try. Like usual, I'll present the questions, and if you want, you can attempt it yourself by pausing the video, and then we'll discuss a solution that I came up with. So let's get right into it. Question number 1, write a program using index of to show only the first name as presented. And it's important that you recognize that the string is presented like this. So there's this white space before the first name and after the last name. Okay, so how I would approach this is, let's create a function. I'm just going to create an arrow function. I'm going to just call it something like get first name. We'll pass in our string. In this case, it's a name, so I'm happy to just call it name. Put in our arrow, and then we'll say return name.trim. Now, what the trim method does is, well, let's pass in our function, and you can see for yourself. So what we will say is that the string that we want to pass through into the function is going to be presented like this. And what you can see is that trim has removed the white space at the beginning and the end of the string. So that's what trim does. We want to keep going. I'm going to use the slice method because I think it's a good opportunity to do so. Now, if you don't know, slice basically segments the string and removes that part of it. So we want to slice from the beginning of the string, of course, and we want to add another parameter to our slice method to tell it when to stop. So if you want to take out the first name, we want to tell slice to watch out for this white space between the first name and the last name. So in order to do that, we're just going to say name.index of, and I'm just going to put in brackets a white space. Now, obviously that's not working. It's just returning a white space in our compiler. And the reason for that is because index of is considering this white space to be the first instance of a white space. So it's just cutting off the slice from there. So we actually want to tell index of to begin its search, not from the 0 position, but from position number 1. So in other words, from capital M. So to do that, we just add a comma inside our brackets here and put 1 here. And you can see now that it's considering this white space to be the first index of a white space. But obviously there is this white space that it's included, and to remove that we just add a -1. And there you go. So this function takes in any string presented like this, and it will take out the first name only. And if you want to change this name, there you go. So it's only taken out the first name. And changing this last name won't really do anything because it disregards that. It only takes out the first name. Cool, so that's question number 1. Let's move on to question number 2. I'm just going to comment this out. Okay, so this one is write a program using index of to show only the last name as presented. Okay, so very similar question. See if you can try this yourself. How I would do it is very similar to the first one. I'm just going to get my arrow function. I'm going to call it this time get last name. I'm going to pass in a string, call it name again. Put in my arrow, brackets, return name.trim. You already know what that does. Yeah, let's use slice again. This time we want to be careful because we don't want to start from the beginning. We actually want to start from this white space. So we can take what we learned from the previous exercise, and we can say name.index of empty space. Begin the index search from index position 1. And then for our second parameter of the slice function, we'll say name.last index of an empty space. And last index of, like the name suggests, it just looks out for the last index. So the slice method begins here and ends here, therefore taking the last name. Let's see if that works. So get last name, and then we'll pass in a string, copy it from here like so, and there you go. It's taken out the last name. Changing the first name shouldn't do anything. Changing the last name to something else, or it will just take out the last name that you changed it to. Cool, so those are 2 very similar questions, really exploring the slice method there. Okay, let's move on to question number 3. Okay, so this one is remove duplicate values from the following array, and they give the array. I'm just going to comment it out. So we have the array in front of us, and you can see it's got multiple marks a couple of Amy's, etc. So we just want to remove duplicate values from the following array. There are a bunch of different ways to do this, so feel free to explore and see if you can come up with your solution. So the way I would do it is, let's use some ES6 methods. So what I actually want to do is I want to think about using things like the set object method. And the way to do this is I will just say something like, I will set up a variable, let's call it const values, and I will just say new set with a capital S, pass in my array. In this case, it's just called array. Maybe I should call this something more helpful. Let's call it names list. I'm going to pass in my array called names list. And what this does is it makes this array into a set object. And actually, if we console log values, you can see that now the array names list is a set object full of these names, and you can see that none of the duplicates exist in this set object. All the duplicates have been removed. So this is great. We have a set object full of values that are non-duplicates. So all we really need to do is pass it back into an array. And to do that, we can use another ES6 method, or at least I think it's ES6. I don't think it existed before, but it is basically the spread syntax. So we can just say console log, put in our square brackets, ... and then values. We'll pass in a variable. And then there you go. It reconverts that set object into an array, and it reconverts it into an array that has no duplicate values. So they're all separate: Mark, Johnson, Sam, Amy, Philip, Raj, Priya. And there you go. That's a nice and easy way, nice and modern JavaScript way of removing duplicate values from a given array. Cool. So let's move on to question number 4. Okay, so this one is nice and simple. Loads of different ways to do this. Create a program to reverse a string. I'm not going to do anything fancy because I don't think this question needs that. I don't think life needs to be more complicated than it already is. I would just say, okay, why don't we get our arrow function again? Love good arrow function. We just say const reverse string for pass in a string. Put in an arrow, and then we'll just say, okay, let's get a variable for what we do in terms of splitting the string into an array, reversing it, and then joining it together. So I can just say const new string, for example, is string dot split. And then, so what this does is it will split the string and convert it into an array. So we can see if for example, return new string, and then we call our function, you can see that string.split has converted this into an array, and each array element is a character from the string, including the white space. So that's what split does. So that's super useful because split basically allows us to plug in all those sweet array methods. So I'm just going to leave this function call here, and we're just going to say string.split dot reverse, and that's an inbuilt method in JavaScript, and then dot join, and that would join our reversed array back into a string. And there you go. This is a reversed hello world, and we can try whatever we want. Ice cream will be reversed. That almost looks French or something. And then we can also think about words that are the same reversed as they are normally, things like race car. These are called palindromes, and to test for the palindrome, we can actually put that test into our function. So we can just say if, for example, new string is equal to string, we can just return, hey, you got a palindrome. And so for a normal word like basket, it will just return the reversed string, but for a word like race car, which is a palindrome, it was instead say, hey, you got a palindrome. And that's a test you can do for if a word is a palindrome or not, for example. Okay, so let's move on to the fifth and final question. Return the sum of all the positive values from an array of numbers. So this I actually got from Code Wars, I believe. So pretty simple, but we just have to be careful to disregard these negative values. In this case, there's only one. So have a crack at that if you want. How I would approach this is I would keep it simple, and let's use some two key function methods. So again, I think this time I'll just call a normal function. I'm just going to say function, call it something like positive sum. We'll pass in our array, and then we'll just put in our curly braces, and I will say return array dot filter. And with our filter function, we have a callback we want to put into it. So I'm just going to call back if x is greater than or equal to 0. So this filter function will check if the value is first of all equal to or above 0. In other words, it will check if it's not negative. And then it's a simple case of summing up all the elements of an array. And to do this, I like using the reduce method. So we can have another callback inside with two parameters, a and b, put in our arrow, a plus b, put in our initial value of 0, and that should do it. Am I missing a bracket? No, I think that's fine. Let's call this function now, and then I'm just going to say array, and you can see that it's summed 22, add 7, it's 29, add the 1, it's 30. So it's ignored this -4. And you can see if we change this, it's still going to be 30 because it's ignoring that value. But if you put it to 2, it's going to be 32 because now they're all positive. If, for example, all of these are negative apart from 7, it's going to just produce 7. So you can see we have a function that's ignoring all the negative values. And it's ignoring all the negative values because we put in a filter method to say that the value should only be equal to 6 or greater. Only equal to 0 or greater. And then we've simply just used the reduce function to add in all those values. And there you go. I hope you enjoyed these 5 JavaScript exercises. There'll be a lot more to come from. And yes, please, if you did enjoy it, feel free to leave a like button below if you want and subscribe for more. See ya.